Bang on time. Bang on time. I don't know if anyone's going to come today, but there we go. So, good morning. It's the Tuesday Chew. It's where we chew things over impromptually, things we've been talking about or recently talked about. Either way, we've got Matthew. It's May the 3rd, 2022. 43 years ago. Can you guess what the weather was like today?
I'm looking out the window today. I mean, I know there's been some climate change, but I mean, pretty much like today. So it was a spring day, so a bit grey.
Oh. Yeah, well, pretty close. Morning, Rachel. So 43 years ago today, it was snowing. And it was snowing, but it had been warm. So there was a mist of about 2 foot over the road. So you couldn't actually see the road or pavements. And I was taking my driving test.
I was just going to say, how the hell do you even know this? I mean, what's going on? But there you go. So, I mean, did you get any sort of little bits of leeway from your driving instructor for that, or your test?
Probably couldn't see the road markings. You know that bit where you reverse around a corner backwards? Yeah. Couldn't see the pavement. I didn't hit anything, so I got away with it. Also, 43 years ago today, Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister. How about that?
Well, there you go. Okay, it was what can I say? A dark day for many people. But anyway, let's move on.
It was a day. It was a day. So what are we talking about today, Matthew?
Well, ironically enough, considering you've just brought up about how certain contexts and circumstances can let people get away with certain things, we're going to talk about the context and circumstance of your business and how maybe we let certain people get away with certain things we shouldn't do. And maybe we set ourselves up for failure. And other times, maybe we set ourselves up for success by hiring the right people, putting them in the right place at the right time. So your people in your team, are they actually accelerators for your business? Are they driving your business, or are they merely passengers, or worse, are they that lead dead weight in the boot of the car that's actually dragging the whole damn thing backwards?
Sparking as they go, right?
Hitting the sleeping policeman as we go.
Yeah, and anyone who's had a body in the back of the car knows how I mean, not me, clearly, but anyone. Morning, Matthew. Matthew's arrived. So this started the conversation I had with Matthew earlier on this morning about a conversation I had with a business owner in the past few weeks, and it went like this. He said to me, he says, "Did you know that this person's left the company?" And I went, "Yeah, I heard something about it." Said, "Yeah, this person was always very busy, seemed to be a major cog in the wheel of this business, always doing stuff. Went and left the company, and nobody picked up his work, and we haven't actually noticed that they've gone." And it's like, well, what caused that? No idea. We're going to have to do something better. So I thought it was an interesting subject. Could it be? I mean, not you watchers, because you know what you're doing with staff, and it's the others. You might like to share it with the others, not you. We're going to be talking about having dead weights in the business, being an anchor with an A. And Matthew got a bit of an upfront contract for you on this discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, all this sort of talk about these things and how it's other people, it's not us. Actually, it is us. I mean, 100%. I've got more scar tissue on this than I care to remember. But I do remember, because it's the difficult things, and it's the areas we fail where we typically learn, right? Hopefully we live to fight another day and learn from it. Because of the nature of some of this scar tissue, I have got previous where sometimes I get a little bit frisky. And I know, Roy, you're exactly the same. And sometimes, because it's this bitter experience, language can get a little bit salty. So I'm going to try and be very professional and keep it very sensible and on an even keel. But if I do fail in that, then I apologize in advance, ladies and gents.
Yes, and if I actually go off on one, and you see Matthew looking down on his phone, he's actually just looking for tractors, whatever they say. And And if you don't know what that means, ask your local Labour MP. They might be able to help you out with that, with great glee, I imagine. Yes, having a passenger in the car. I mean, so I've been in this situation, and we had to have a reorganisation, and I've been in the same situation. We had to release some people to be brilliant in another organisation, and after 6 months, we all looked around and went, well, what did they do? Because we haven't noticed. And how do you prevent this sort of thing? Because when we hire people, we're giving them money, we're giving them time, we're giving them investment of the organisation and knowledge. How do we go about making sure they contribute? Or is that sort of shutting the door if the horse has bolted? Where do we start with making sure that we have contributors, I think, in the business? How do we do that?
That's a huge question. And I think, as Danny has just said there in the chat, no one comes to work wanting to do a bad job, which doesn't mean, as you rightly say, that bad jobs don't happen. But I think the first thing to do, where do we start? Always start with that person that you see in the morning when you're shaving or putting on your makeup or whatever it is you do first thing, because the place to start with all of these things is in the mirror. As a hiring manager, as a line manager, as a business leader, the first question you've got to ask is, where did it all go so wrong? And the chances are it's probably that person you see every morning there in the mirror. Because it's really, do you set yourself up for success with your hiring and your onboarding? Do you set them up for success by empowering them, giving them the tools to do the job? And then do you set them up for success by coaching them to be the very best they can possibly be, and by getting out of their bloody way and protecting them from acts of idiocy from above? That's really critical areas.
And there's a lot of cogs in that, Angie. I've just seen Rachel's popped up for conversation like this with clients last week. They were people problems. And sometimes you've got to make difficult decisions. But again, it's cause and effect. It's, I quite often talk about, where did the accident happen? Did the accident happen when the bonnet hit the tree, or did it happen before that, when you decided not to get your brakes fixed or your tires replaced? Where did the problem happen? So it's cause and effect, and quite often we look at fixing the effect. Worst thing that can happen is we don't notice there is an effect, and these people become a drain on our business and a drain from everyone else. Where do we start, Matthew, with this? Let's just go right back to the beginning, when the accident started.
I think you're absolutely right. Where the accident starts very often, and let's change the word accident. Let's take a leaf out of the book of our friends in the emergency services. There are no accidents. There are only incidents, which means they're preventable. All right.
Ooh.
Preventable incident, not an accident. So how do we prevent these incidents? Well, it's by bloody good due diligence, and that means good process. And let's just say, when it comes to talent acquisition, bringing the right people into your organization, getting them in the right place, putting them in setting them up for success, there's three critical parts to this. The first thing is knowing what good looks like before you have vacancies. So start thinking about the recruitment process, not for the business you have today, but for the business you're going to have in 365 days time, or in 2 years time. So put a really good, sensible plan in place for the kinds of people you're going to need, not for now, but for 365 days time and beyond. Okay, so know what talent looks like for that. So the first thing is knowing what you're looking for. Second, so you're never recruiting in desperation. You're recruiting strategically rather than in tactical, reactive style.
That happens a lot, doesn't it? Yeah. And before we go to the second thing, you find someone either leaves the company or a position arises, and you have a desperate manager desperate to fill this position, because if they don't fill the position, they end up doing the work. And then you get someone sitting in front of them who's desperate for a role, and you get a desperate leader and a desperate interviewee or someone who's desperate for the role, and then somewhere down the line we get all shocked and surprised when the results are what's the word I'm looking for? Desperate results. Absolutely. So point one, know what good looks like. Be prepared for any future roles coming up. So there's no surprises there. Point two.
Absolutely. So point two is actually your hiring process, your actual recruiting process. What does that look like? Have you got sensible levels of assessment to make it as objective as possible? Notice I don't say objective, because there's always going to be a subjective element whenever you are recruiting somebody, whenever you're hiring somebody, because it's two human beings. They've both got their own agendas. They've both got the way they show up on that day. You're trying to read somebody else. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I've never yet been able to get inside somebody's brain and actually know exactly what's really going on in there. And as the old phrase is, George Bernard Shaw quote is, the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's taken place, right? So when you're in that kind of scenario, actually reading somebody well is difficult. And the person before, the interview candidate that came in before this one that's in front of me now, if they were absolute garbage, then this one's going to be looking really good by comparison. It's like back in the day when you'd go out to a bar, you'd make sure that you go out with somebody who looks a bit like you, just not maybe a little bit less, maybe not as good looking, or not even worse looking than you if it's me, and then by comparison you look great, because people will compare, right? So you can't help yourself as an interviewer. No matter how good you are, no matter how objective you think you're being, you're always going to be seeing this person within the context of those wider things. So make sure that you never ever take somebody on the basis of one interview. You've got to have at least two. CVs, what's your approach to CVs? The curriculum vitae, the resume, or AKA a fairy story, a self-portrait that is painted by a narcissist. It's something which is just basically, well, I mean, putting it very nicely, nobody's ever put the negatives on a CV, have they?
Yeah, they don't do that, do they? They don't say timing, punctuality, a bit rubbish. Attention to detail, sort of depends on the day. Early morning, pretty good, but it fades off quickly, and then we get the lunchtime snooze. No one ever says that. No one ever says that they run and hide when there's a challenge going, and they can't be trusted.
No.
And they can't be relied on. And you don't get that in CVs. I hate CVs.
No,
I hate CVs.
Application forms, actually get somebody to fill in an application form for your actual role. Make them actually write something themselves. Because I mean, nine times out of 10, if you can't write a CV, what do? You go to a professional CV writer. You get it written for you. So sometimes it's a narcissistic self-portrait that's actually been written by a ghostwriter.
It was. I remember seeing a CV not so long ago, and I looked at it and I went, "This person was like 21, but writing." I mean, that's right. So I actually lifted that bit out of the CV, stuck it into Google, and it actually came up with, write your CV this way, it'll get you a job. Well, it'll get you searched on Google, that's for sure. That was a classic, and no CVs, and I think it's important what you said. Application form for the job, not just one generic application form for the job. I really like that. Yeah. What else you got? Number 3.
Well, no, I haven't finished number 2 yet.
Oh, sorry.
There's also assessments. Look at things like psychometrics. And by the way, for anybody who's watching who doesn't know what psychometrics are, these are varying different studies, either around personality or communication style, behavioral style, decision-making style. Sometimes there's ones about aptitude and competency. There's some really good ones where you can actually tailor the assessment to the requirements and the core competencies of that particular role. All of these things just mitigate the chances of failure. They're setting you up for success, working to a very clearly well-defined job role around the primary need to have function indicators, around the winner's attributes, so the mindset, the growth mindset, who's showing up here, is this going to be an A player? How do I spot an A player when I see them? And also the team dynamic, how are they going to fit into that team? So a lot of work needs to be done. You can't just have somebody come in and go, yeah, you look all right. You've got one head, 2 arms, 2 legs, look broadly like you're going to turn up and not pee people off too badly. Happy days, you've got a job. But how many times have we recruited people like that?
Yeah, and it is interesting. I mean, we talk about assessments, and assessments are only part of the hiring process. We shouldn't lean on them completely, because I mean, as I look at them, whichever one you go, and there's a lot of good assessments out there, and I know we do assessments, but there's any sort of choice. I mean, there's loads of them, and an assessment is just giving you some clues in order to have a better hiring process. Just because it says this person is great doesn't mean you should hire them, because you've got to say, well, it is pointing to the fact that you stand a better chance of success, but we still need to look at the differences. And I sort of say, well, if one of these assessments comes across my desk, 75% of the time, it's a good indication. But we want to weed out the 25%, which is another point I want to bring up after point 3, and we'll come back to that. But assessments are great, but they're not the be-all and end-all. There's a lot of human skills in this as well. Matthew, point 3. Have we got to point 3, by the way? Have I interrupted again?
No, that's bang on. Absolutely bang on to point 3. So point 3 is this, and this is the one that I most commonly see the big failures with, is onboarding. How many times do you see people, and I've done it myself, totally been there, got the scar tissue on this one, where you say, I've hired an expert, I've hired somebody who's brilliant, I've hired somebody who's a self-starter, and that they can shadow somebody for a week, and then they can fly. They can fly. Where they've been successful before is not your organization. They've been successful at maybe even the same role, but in a different place. Context is really important. Situation they're in is really important. What does it take for them to be successful in this organization? And also, if you don't do a really strong onboarding for, let's say it's a 3-month probation period, well, what's the point of a probation period if you're not testing anything? You might as well just sign them off on day 1 if you're not going to test them. The point of the probation period is, this is your opportunity to find out whether or not you got it right, and whether or not they got it right.
I've worked in some huge companies, and typically the probation was after 6 months. If they didn't piss anyone off, they'll start a fight. With the language, do apologise. We did warn you at front. If they did not upset people and start a fight, we'd sign them off. Quite often, probation periods would be extended if they weren't quite sure. And you'd look at the probation periods, a week before the end of it, say, well, do we take them on or not? And not quite sure why they're taking them on. And this is where we come to the main subject, which we'll start in a second, about how do you spot a passenger once they've got through these filters. Unfortunately, the filters quite often can have great big holes in them, and you need to make this filter quite small. But how do you identify you've got a passenger? But sometimes I'd like to just go back to point 2 with you, Matthew. Point 1, knowing what good looks like for our role in a few years' time, and we talk about this a lot in Sandler, and it's reticular activation. Is we start looking for what good looks like in every candidate, and we're searching for that because we're desperate as well, right? But one of the things we should actually document really, really hard in a non-pressurized situation: what are the red flags? What does bad look like? And we sort of look at it in 3 ways. You have green flags, which is what good looks like, and quite often we just stop there. But then we want the amber flags, which is, these are nice to have. So must-haves, green flags; nice to have, amber flags. But we have to be able to document very clearly and have it in front of us. What are the red flags? These are if we see one of them, they do not get anywhere near our organization. And I think that's the big trip why people don't look for they don't have the red flags documented.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things within that. Within the amber flags as well, you've got things which, there's the nice to haves, as you rightly say. There's also some things which are trainable. So there's certain things you can live with for a period of time, because you're taking this person on knowing you've got to train them and coach them into being able to do that particular thing, because they just don't know how to do that at this point in time. But I think that the point you're making here is, here's what it takes to get hired, here's what it takes to get fired. The goods, the absolute non-negotiable, actually we can't live with that. Actually, that's really powerful. That's a very, very powerful thing to do. And being able to take it down that road where you can almost disqualify people on very clear criteria is absolutely critical. One thing I was going to say about the onboarding process, you mentioned the extension of probation periods. I have to say, these days, and this is me looking in the mirror here because I know that I've done it in the past, my simple rule is this: if you extend a probation period, that is a management failing. That is a failure of an onboarding process. You have failed to use the opportunity of the onboarding process to correctly assess whether or not you've got a good hire, or whether or not you have taken mediocrity into your business, or whether or not you've actually got a bad hire, which is worse.
I say Danny's made a comment there. We must be cautious about bias in our filters too. Absolutely. Biggest learning was looking at a peer I thought was awful and learning what they did that I didn't do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can always learn from some people. You can always learn from some people, and I think we have to define what good looks like. We have to define what winner looks like. A player in our business, and again, some people are A players but don't fit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because culture is a big part of what we do, and that can be bad as well. So what I like to do, I'm conscious of the time. I've only got about 9 minutes left of this because it's going quite quick, and I've only sworn once. How do we spot a passenger? How do we spot someone who is hiding? And it's I guess it's easier to do in a big company than a small company. But also, from a sales background, man, it's easy. It's easy to hide and be a passenger in sales.
Yeah, you know what? It's even easy. Even in small companies, you can get passengers very often, and maybe you've seen this yourself a few times. Is you know the first people that get hired are friends and family. Well, of course, friends and family get free pass on quite a lot of things. So they get hiding places because they've got history. And maybe things get tolerated that shouldn't. But to Danny's point, it is about making sure that you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because we do have our own biases. As human beings, we tend to think the stuff we do matters because we've got that availability heuristic. We've got those things which say the stuff I do is the important bit. Salespeople always think that sales is the most important. The finance people are always going to think the finance is the most important, and the credit control is the most important part of the sales, because it's not a sale until it gets paid for. Both are right. That's the point we're making, right? Both are right. The marketeers are always going to think that the salespeople are going to mess up the marketing bit because they mess up the brand positioning. They're right as well. But salespeople are also right. So the point is that this is an ecosystem, and every part of that ecosystem's got a part to play, and we should be very conscious of individual bias on this. So how do you hold people accountable? And accountable is a really key word here. This is not micromanagement. This is allowing A players to rise to the top and to stand up and be counted, to learn from their failures, to be celebrating their successes, but also to highlight areas where maybe you've got somebody who needs to go and be a flower in somebody else's garden because they're a weed in yours. Well, you set it up for success through that onboarding period, because they get used to a weekly cadence of regular one-to-one meetings with their line manager where they're going to be held accountable. What went well this week? What did you achieve? What did we tick off have we stayed close to our individual behavior plans? Well, they get used to the idea of having an individual behavior plan, which week in, week out gives them all the things they need to do in order to intentionally design their future, to hit their targets, to achieve the things they need to achieve. Now, these are things that are behaviors, i.e. things 100% within their own control, which means you can hold them accountable to those things. So knowing what that looks like and to be able to coach them, coaching is the most important aspect of management, to be able to help them to do what they're doing well, increasingly, to do even more. To be able to do certain things differently if it's not working, and to do other things even better.
Yeah, I think I think hands-off management is also a curse, and I notice you mentioned the name micromanagement, and I could be wrong. I throw it out there. Whenever I hear someone complain about micromanagement, is that they were typically people who didn't like to be held accountable, and actually were found out for being passengers. But I think accurate correct management is very important. Now, Mark said something here. Expectations on both sides. It's easy to take someone on. However, are both parties living up to the requirements of being accountable? Now, that's beautiful. When you set accountability targets, you can't say that's for them, it doesn't account to me. As a leader, you have to walk the walk as well. You have to talk the talk. Otherwise, it just falls over. And you've got to make the sort of culture that actually, if I don't hold up my end of the bargain, you have a right to pull me up on it. And I think that's a great point, Mark. Yeah. And accountability is a two-way street.
A prerequisite for accountability is trust. And you cannot build trust with somebody as a leader, as a manager, unless you're prepared to actually hold your hands up for the times when you've screwed up, because you're a human being. Of course you're going to screw up. The point is that the only thing that's unacceptable is hiding failure. Failure means that you've tried something. You will never, ever, ever have a 100% success rate when you're trying new stuff and you're outside of your comfort zone. And the only way you're going to drive things forward in your organization or as an individual is being outside your comfort zone. So if you want to have a high functioning team as a leader, you've got to have a culture where failure is learned from and is open. Absolute candor is critical.
And you, I'm a bit of a fanboy for Elon Musk. And Elon Musk was talking about his SpaceX, his Tesla, and all these other bits of businesses, and clearly found a bit of change down the back of his settee and bought Twitter. But he was saying that actually in his organization, failure has very minor consequences. Because we don't mind if people try something and fail. What has major consequences is people who don't innovate and don't push forward. They don't want those sort of people. We've seen how fast SpaceX has gone, and when he compared it to NASA, and he was saying that actually one of the biggest problems with NASA is that innovating and failing caused major consequences, which meant that nothing moved very, very quickly and committees were involved. But certainly, going back to the question, how do we identify passengers, or how can we make it such that we can identify passengers if we can't now?
So those weekly one-to-ones are absolutely critical. Being able to spot somebody in that way and having that open relationship, that trust between them. The point is, because there's no ambiguity, when you've got those individual behavior plans, when you know what good looks like, when both parties, and to Mark's point, it is a two-way street here, when both parties knows what it takes to succeed and also what it takes to fail in this organization with zero ambiguity, when you get it really right, when things aren't going well, both parties know there is no surprises here, which means that when you're sitting down with somebody on a one-to-one basis and you say, so where's this going wrong? And what do you think the consequences are going to be if we don't put this right? They end up telling you when actually they're failing in this organization. They end up telling you that actually maybe there's no longer a fit, or maybe there never was and they should go somewhere else. Ultimately, they end up almost self-selecting, which is an incredibly powerful, open, ethical relationship. And it means that actually you're treating people with respect, and it's a two-way street.
Yeah, it is a two-way street. And I think not holding our staff accountable is a failure of management, but it's also denying the organization the best opportunity of success. And I know it can be difficult because we're all very, very busy, and having these, we can sort of push them to one side. But I think if we cannot set our people up for success from day one, we can end up with passengers. We can end up with people who don't contribute, and it's a real curse on our business. And before we finish, clearly we're known as sales and leadership trainers. Matthew, you're going to be talking about something like this in a Zoom. A Zoom briefing. Tell us a little bit about that. When is it?
It's on Wednesday the 18th, so a couple of weeks' time. It's at 1 p.m. It's free to attend. It's 2 hours. First come, first serve. I do limit the attendee list to no more than 8 people, because I find on these Zoom things, it's actually, especially when you're talking about something which is really intimate to people's businesses, you don't want to have an abundance of people there. I'm also going to run sector exclusivity, so I won't have competitors on there either, because I just don't think that's necessarily right. So yeah, if somebody's interested who's watching this here today, or watching it on the catch up, in attending a free 2-hour executive briefing, taster session, whatever you want to call it, the name is exactly the same as the one we've got here today, which is who's in your team? Are they drivers or passengers? We're going to be talking very much about some practical solutions. I mean, I'm not going to be able to answer everything in 2 hours flat, but it will give you some practical takeaways. And if there's something there where you think, actually, I could do with a bigger conversation at some stage, happy to book in a one-to-one session as well, to discover other areas where we might be able to support you and your business.
Brilliant. So it's 30 minutes and 42 seconds. We've overrun a bit, but there we go. We're done. If anyone's got any ideas for a chat, an impromptu chat about what we do, we'll talk about anything, anytime. It's a Tuesday Chew. We're chewing it over. Might be of any value, answer any questions, do whatever we can in 30 minutes. It's a big ask. Please ping us a mail, ping us a message. We're both on. Where can we get hold of you, Matthew?
Here on LinkedIn, mdh@sandler.com for an email, or my mobile number is 07715 269 724.
Brilliant. And my number is 07 867 525 868, 07 867 525 868. Love to speak to you. Love to hear from you. Take care. Thank you for watching. See you next week. Goodbye from Matthew.
And yeah, it's also goodbye from him.
Him. Bye-bye.